What's up, everybody, and how are we doing on this fine day? 2026, February 2nd. Haven't made a little longer video for a couple weeks, so figured I'd do that. I recently changed the name of my channel from TFG, which stands for the Foil Guy, which stood for like all the conspiracy stuff that I like talking about and and researching and studying, but I thought it was a little too abstract and the people probably wouldn't know what the hell it meant, so I got rid of it and I got something a little more in line with what I do, so everyone can art at Anyone Can Art on YouTube. You can buy me a coffee at Anyone Can Art 3394. I'll start my kick thing up. I know I've been saying that for a minute, but I've been waiting on cameras and headsets and all this other shit for a minute and just been learning how to use OBS and a couple other things. I'm an unk, as the kids would say, so it's taking me a second to learn this stuff. Anyway, like I said yesterday on a short video, I'm already thinking about my next graphic novel that I want to make after I'm done with the one that I'm doing right now. And basically I'm going to make a map right now. My graphic novel that I want to do, the idea that I got is about being on, going over the ice wall and doing all the, adventuring and stuff that, is over there, hopefully, maybe, who knows, right? So I want to make like a map, like an old-timey looking map of this territory for my graphic novel that I'm thinking about. So I've always been kind of interested in that whole thing, with everything, the possibilities that are going on beyond the ice wall. I've always thought it's pretty interesting to think, what could be over there, man? Really, honestly, what could be over there? Because, like, if you know anything about history, you know that people don't get along. Human beings have never got along. It doesn't matter where we are in the world. It's become racist in some, ways, but in a lot of ways it's more just territory and resources, Long before, anybody knew about other races, you knew about your neighbor. Your neighbor probably looked like you. And, so people always find a way to hate each other and that kind of thing. So I'm kind of going for like an old map look. I was thinking about a scroll, but the way that social media is and posting on these things, it's kind of difficult to get the horizontal ratio that I want, because everything goes into a portrait kind of a look. So, oh well. We adapt. We adapt. We come for you. Resistance is futile. Sorry, I'm a Star Trek dork. Anyway, there's a lot of stuff out there about the about this particular subject, but I don't really give a shit. I want to have it my way. There's the subject of just, there's a lot of stuff out. There's a lot of research about the histories of the different continents and stuff. There's there's Atlantis. There's, the sinking empire. There's a whole bunch of stuff in our lore here on Earth in different cultures and societies over the times who have, kind of alluded to a lot of the histories and whatnot that are on over the ice wall. And then just look at what's going on in our very world, How is it that all the countries in the world can get along on that one thing on Atlantis? How is that? For reals, how is that? It makes no sense to me. But it's like, how all these countries that they can't get along to save their lives, they can't get along for anything, are able to do it for Antarctica. Yeah, there's bases down there. There's things of that nature down there. But, it's just hard for me to believe. So we're going to put our little Earth here in the middle. And the whole thing about this, like, this whole thing, when you think about it, it's crazy, because like our world exists in the middle. We'll say this little thing here, it's too big, but we'll say that's our Earth, everything we know. But don't imagine a sphere. Imagine just a round mass with all the continents and everything, and then a huge wall around it. A bunch of continents and then another huge wall. So that's all I'm doing is I'm drawing a map for my possible graphic novel. I will take significant liberties in how I represent stuff. So this is merely a for funsies, right? So I'm going to use my circle cheater to bust out a circle here in the middle, which will be Earth. And it's really not that big, you know, compared to the stuff that I've seen. So it's like, we're gonna go with that big. Alright, cool. That big. There's our Earth. Everything we know, everything we are, exists here. So, there's our Earth, and then we start making the ice wall around it, or what we call Antarctica. The thing is, there are breaks in the wall, though, where people and creatures and who knows what else can get out, and other things can get in. And that's kind of what my book is going to focus on. It's going to focus on the creatures that come from that realm into our realm. Because, like, you know, just taking a shot in the dark here, what if, and I'm a science fiction nerd, so this is hard for me to say, what if space doesn't exist? I know I'm not a flat earther and I don't usually believe in that, but I'm taking, like I said, just a leap in disbelief here, and I'm going to say, what if space doesn't exist and our realm is exactly that? It's a realm, a dimension, where it's just this enormous mass, bigger than our Earth, obviously, far bigger than our Earth, with other continents around it and everything, and then who knows what else is on beyond there. I know that there's like a wasteland and volcanoes and stuff beyond the map, you know, but what if that's the realm? And then you can get to another realm by, you know, via portal or whatever, who knows, because in a world that fantastical, it wouldn't be a stretch to think that, you know, some, you know, really crazy ways of travel existed, okay? So, you sticking with me? I know it's a lot. But I want to make a book where the person, the people, whoever, I haven't got that deep into it yet, the characters run into people like an expedition. Basically, either like an expedition from the outside world who wants to come to the inner world, which is just as mysterious to them as they are to us. Okay? Yeah. So, let's start drawing our geography here. So, I gotta think for a second, you know, if the world was round, how would everything fit, you know? We'll just say, like, you know, here's Africa, and then we'd have to have, like, Spain and stuff and all that going on right there. There's that. And that. So yeah, you know, it's really wild when you think about it. And, you know, don't get me wrong, I'm sure the universe is probably just as boring as space is and everything, and, you know, we'll probably never be able to get out of here and be stuck in this fucking place forever, but it's fun to think, right? It's fun to dream a little bit about the possibilities of the universe and the world. So, we're just gonna say, there's our world right there. I don't want to forget Japan and Indonesia. So anyway, so there's our world. There's all of our world right there. Flat. I know it's not perfect. It's okay, though. This isn't going to be perfect. Like, imagine this is a map made by somebody in, like, the 1780s that, like, went out to the beyond the wall and came back and drew this map for an expedition. And then that expedition goes on this, like, mythical Odyssey, Homer-style journey through all these continents where they meet people and they get into battles and they trade goods and they learn things and people die and then people fall in love and all that shit, you know? Okay. So, now your normal depiction of the ice wall, it'll have the Earth in the center, right? Surrounded by Antarctica, our wall, the first wall, with these breaches. Like right there are a couple breaches where you can get through, okay? Then there's continents all around, and then another thingy, some more continents, and then that's literally the map. Off the map from there, there's like all sorts of crazy shit. We're not going to get into the crazy shit. We're just going to consider this part off limits because we're just drawing a map of the interior. So, that being said, I'm going to start just randomly making some continents here. And when you think about it, you know, some of these continents are big. You know, you think about, like, that continent is as big as Asia, you know? And some of these continents were freaking enormous. Just enormous. Turn my TV down. I don't want to get any freaking copyright strikes that I don't even know about when I'm trying to just have a little fun, you know? So anyway, yeah, you know, so there's all these islands in a circular pattern. Some of them are close to the wall, you know, and big. And some of them are kind of small and such. But, you know, think about it. Each one of these, I mean, think about our world. In the smallest islands on our world have had some of the most unique civilizations on them. So, think about all these islands, island nations and island kingdoms and island continents, really, beyond the ice wall and what they would have. And it's like, who knows what they think of us, you know, like, I would imagine that they would have stories just like we have our stories. You know, they have their stories. And it's like, when you think about it, you know, like, okay, this is getting more like conspiratorial thinking, but like, in order for something like this to exist without us knowing about it, it would have to be because the powers that be, whatever they are, decided to lie to us for a long time. And to what ends, I don't know, you know, just to keep us down, I guess. I don't, you know, whatever trope you want to think of, they did it, you know. And maybe they just don't want us coming over here, which is weird because you'd think that they would want people moving around, you know, and getting around. But when you think about it, when you look at like the layout of the over the ice wall, it's kind of like the layout of a solar system. You got your sun in the middle, which everything else revolves around. And each one of these can be considered like a planet. So it's not too far-fetched to think like people, say maybe people from the ice world came over our wall when we were very primitive and helped build our society, or found our society already being built and joined it, and came up with this huge myth about over the ice wall is all the demons and the bad stuff and, you know, all these horrible things. And you want to stay here. Later on, as time progressed and science and technology progressed, so did the myths, you know, and they just changed the story up a little bit. Well, it's not like there's this ice wall or nothing. We're on a planet, a closed system, and we're in a solar system of revolving planets. And then there's other ones, but they're so far away that it doesn't really matter because you'll never be able to get to them, you know? So, you gotta ask yourself, why would somebody do something like that, you know? To what end? I mean, the same ends people have here in our world, you know? People suck. That's the end. People suck, and the more that people get, the more they want. And that's nothing new. That just seems to be human nature, unfortunately. But it's like, why would you hide this huge world from us? Because to me, it's like, if I had a choice, you know, if some genie popped up right now and was like, hey, these are your choices. You can either, you know, have the universe be what it is and have space be what it is and be, you know, go to planets and terraform them and all this bullshit and fly around and yada yada, or the world can be the actual realm that, you know, this says it is, where there's all these different worlds and societies and civilizations beyond the wall, and you can go and, you know, have an adventure there and check them all out. I would totally opt for that one. Imagine the kind of adventure that would be. You know, who the hell knows what kind of stuff you'd run into. But that would be such an awesome adventure. It would be worth it. I'm pretty sure it'd be worth it. I think so. So I'm just making all these islands and stuff, and they're kind of bunched up closely like that, because then we get another ice wall, and then we got some scatterers in the peripheries, you know. So Sorry, drinking my water. Yeah, there's all sorts of places, and a lot of them, I'd have to go look at the map and stuff, the actual ice map. I'm making my own, kind of, because that's going to be the idea behind my book, is that for whatever reason, I'm not, an expedition of people find this map, or a guy comes back saying, I got this in the Beyond the Ice Wall, whatever it is. And I'll have to throw some history in there, like maybe it's going to be a ship from the Spanish Empire in the 1720s or something, and they're, coming back from a silver haul from the Andes going back to Spain, and a storm turns them around, and they get through one of these corridors right here that gets them into the ice wall, and they find all these great societies and whatnot, and they learn about the place, and they're stuck in beyond the ice wall for like 20 years, and the guy makes his way back, and he has all this proof and shit, and this map that he gives to these people, that then they decide to go on an expedition, and then we just kind of go from there. I'd have to think about it a little more, but I mean, the storytelling potential is enormous, it really is, and it seems like it's a very untapped market. Not so much that it hasn't been, obviously, because I'm using it as as something to do for this, for this video, but, I don't see a whole shitload of work being devoted to stories pertaining to Beyond the Ice Wall. That's all I'm saying. And I think there's a very missed potential there. Alright, so we got our main cluster. We're gonna start making our ice wall again. So now that we're in this open area here, the ice walls get bigger, and you got to think about it in terms of like how life was hundreds of years ago, right? Not today. Today we have all the technology, and today it all boils down to belief. You got to believe. People say, well, there's stuff, you can see space right now on a live feed, and it's like, that's very true. And like I said, disbelief, suspend your disbelief for a minute. What if that was all bullshit and the government was lying? Not just our government, but all governments. The Russians, the Soviets back in their time, JAXA, the Europeans. Because like I said, it took all the governments to get together and say you can't go to Antarctica. So we would have to put